I think that pain is like a doorway to your authenticity. Chronic symptoms and this distress that we have in our body, this like survival mode energy, is what I like to imagine is my inner child screaming for attention. Like, what about me? Why can't you hear me? Like, I need a voice too. What's this persona that you've turned into that is absolutely nothing to do with who we really are? You don't think those things, you don't believe those things. You need to stand up for yourself and self-advocate and all the, all that stuff.
Yes.
So it's like the self-awareness and self-discovery that happens throughout the recovery as a natural process is the work, like discovering your own voice, your own needs, your own values, your own self, what you like. I mean, what a revelation. I had no idea.
Hey there, I'm Anna Holtzman, and this is From Chronic Pain to Passion. I'm a licensed psychotherapist and coach who helps passionate creatives like you learn how to heal from chronic pain and other symptoms so you can reclaim your energy and live the creative life of your dreams. In my past life, I was a disillusioned video editor working in reality TV and struggling with chronic migraine for over 10 years. But after I discovered the mind-body methods that I'll share with you on this podcast, I recovered from the chronic cycle and got back my creative spark. And I want that for you too. So let's get into it. Hello, dear listener. Welcome to today's episode in which I got to have a conversation with someone I've been a big fan of for a while. My guest, Dani Fagan, specializes in the care of the chronic condition or mind-body medicine community, having healed from years of chronic pain and anxiety using these tools herself. She is a coach and teaches yoga, meditation, and breathwork to the self-healing community. Her approach harnesses the power of the nervous system to help folks recover from chronic symptoms by training the body mind into a place of safety and authenticity and out of fight, flight, freeze, fawn survival mode. Dani has a fantastic website called mytmsjourney.com, which is a go-to resource for mind-body healing, and I highly recommend it. I couldn't get enough of our conversation because Dani is so real and raw and truly herself, and that felt like a great big permission slip to be myself. It might just feel that way to you too. So take a listen. Dani, hi. It's such a pleasure to finally meet you. I've been following you for ages. I feel like I know you, but we've actually never chatted. So welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Anna. It's so lovely to meet you finally. I know we've been trying to do this for some time now, and it is an absolute pleasure to spend some time with you and shoot the shit. See what we come up with.
Same. I can't wait to see what we come up with. So I have a hunch that many listeners who have found their way to me probably have also found their way to you and may
Hmm.
know about you and your story and what you do. But for those who are totally new to you, would you share what you presently do in life and who you're helping?
Sure. So presently, I help anybody suffering from persistent symptoms, persistent physical symptoms, anxiety, chronic pain. So that mind body medicine community. So, like you say, very similar sort of community as your own. And I don't teach live classes at the moment, but I do have a yoga, meditation, and breathwork school that I have it all in video format online that I teach to the self-healing community. And I also have a sort of coach kind of role as well. And I teach online masterclasses that basically aim towards simplifying mind body recovery into digestible formats, basically. So there's a lot, as you know, there's a lot of very complex and very scientific and very, even the therapy wording and stuff
Yeah.
can be quite complex for people to understand, especially if they're suffering. So I like to really simplify topics and present them to people to kind of get over that barrier of learning and understanding at the beginning, especially of people's healing journey. So yeah, quite a few different things, but mainly coaching and encouraging and teaching in that sense.
Yeah, thanks so much for laying that out for listeners and hearing you talk about your focus on simplifying things. It's reminding me that when I was in like the early part of my journey with migraine and entering this whole mind body world and trying to figure it all out, how what my path would be. I
Mm.
came across your website, my TMS Journey website, which was pretty new at the time.
Mm.
And I thought, my gosh, this is so helpful. It just like breaks this whole complexity down into language that's just so relatable.
Right. That was the main aim with that is like,
Yeah.
I remember how hard it was for myself to not only find the resources, there were some books and there was some stuff online when I started my own recovery, but it was quite hard to, pick the right pieces from each thing and what works and what does that even mean and who are all
Yeah.
these people and who do I trust and all this. So it's kind of like I wanted to make it really easy for people to find the information that is legitimate and, tried and tested, so to speak, and simplified, because it's hard enough when you're struggling to even consider a different approach to what you may be used to in the medical world, and
Yeah.
to be given all this information that it's you have to heal yourself and you can't rely on anyone else and all the rest of the pressure that we have. Like, I wanted to make it easy, as easy as possible for people. So thank you for saying that. That was the
Yeah.
main goal with that that
Yes.
project.
And it's like it's got friendly looking graphics. Like it just feels like a really safe place. Um,
Right.
and you've spoken about your own personal healing journey in a bunch of places. I first
Mm.
came across you on Nicole Sachs's podcast when I
Mm.
was learning from her how to use journaling. Um, and would you like to share with these listeners what it was that led you into this work? Because this is like you were not doing this work, let's say 5, 10 years ago,
No,
right?
no, 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 no. I was a corporate high achieving corporate girly. I was a perfectionist, people pleasing, type A, I ticked all the boxes of what we know that is very common in people that suffer from these types of conditions. I worked in the digital marketing arena, so I'm a graphic designer by trade, and I work in digital marketing, which I still do for myself now, which is coming quite handy. In doing my own work and doing the website and all of that. But I basically came to this work through my own experience, through my own suffering. And as many of us do in this space, we feel once we learn these modalities and we learn about mind body medicine, it's kind of like you feel compelled to share it, you feel compelled to make it part of your purpose in a way. Like, I never really had that before. It was very much like, well, what's my job, what's my career, what's my earnings, what's my growth, and all of that kind of lifestyle approach. Whereas now it's, all of the things that I'm doing are very much based on my own experience, my own decisions, my own intuition, my own learning. It's not like I went to university and now I'm a coach in this because I learned how to do it from someone else, right? It's like it's all through personal research, personal experience. So I went through my own healing journey from chronic back pain, which now that was the peak symptom that I had, which everybody I think has one great big the winner of the list of laundry list of symptoms. But
That's a good
like
way to put it, the winner. Yeah.
so yeah, the one that made me sit up and listen, or lie down and listen actually. um but yeah, now looking back, I've got a list on my phone somewhere of all of the symptoms that I've experienced over the last few years, and looking back previous to my back pain extravaganza was many other things as well. Like, I never knew I was an anxious person. I never knew I was a people pleaser. I never knew all of these behaviors and patterns, and that I now know through all of this sort of self-awareness work that we do for this kind of recovery. I had no idea. Like, I used to think I was gluten intolerant. I used to think that I thought I had a brain tumor for ages because I had bad headaches for a long time,
Mm.
all sorts of stuff, insomnia. Like, the list is, I think, pretty much everything I've had, everything that is the top, standard stuff that we experience in the mind body space. Like, I've had all of that. So yeah, my own recovery led me to find Dr. Sarno's work, Dr. Sarno's book, and then, to cut a long story short, I found Nicole Sachs as a result of finding Dr. Sarno's work. And then from there, I found and sort of developed. I went into yoga teaching because my back was well enough to do it. And then I sort of found my own role within this space as that kind of teacher of the soothing aspect of recovery work, and teaching people how to get back to moving their body without being scared of moving their body, and using nervous system regulation tools like breath work and meditation and things like that. So it was nice to be part of this community, first of all, as a patient, let's say, and then find my space, my niche, I guess, in this space, to be able to help people. So it's not doing the same thing as kind of everybody else is doing. It's like I really wanted to find somewhere that felt right for me as well. That was like, I still don't feel comfortable being a coach. Like, it's not really ever been my forte. I do it well, but like dealing with people face to face, and I don't know, it's weird, isn't it? How you kind of like, you gravitate to a certain thing, and yoga teaching and concept teaching is, I find where I feel most comfortable, I think.
Hey, sorry, go
Yeah.
ahead.
No,
Yeah, no,
that's it. I
I
waffled on
love
too long
hearing
there
that.
anyway.
Not at all. No, I love hearing that. And there's a ton I relate to also about your story. I am, I'm working now as a therapist and as a coach, working with folks with chronic symptoms, but
Yeah.
not all that long ago, I wasn't doing anything even remotely similar to this work. I was a video editor and I worked in reality television. So,
No way.
yes,
I did
yes.
not know this.
Hmm.
We're going to need
Yeah.
receipts. We're going to need to see that footage.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome to. Actually, my
I
my
love it.
video editor real website is offline now because it was built in Flash. And as a
Oh,
graphic
okay.
designer, you'll
Yeah.
know what that means. That doesn't work anymore.
Flash is a nightmare.
But anyway, I digress. Um, but I love hearing you talk about how you wanted to kind of gravitate toward, like, this is a niche world unto itself, this
Right.
mind body healing world, but then you wanted to gravitate toward like what niche of that world felt simpatico
Yeah.
for you
Yeah.
as a practitioner, as a provider. And um something that I hear a lot, and I'm sure you do too, from folks who are starting off in their recovery journey, is that they're trying to figure out what the right tools are. And
Yeah.
they're oftentimes asking me questions like it's an either or. Like, should I be doing the journaling, the emotional excavation work, or should I be doing the mindset work where I'm just trying to chill out
Mm.
about everything?
Mm.
Or should I be moving my body and doing yoga? Or should I be doing somatic tracking?
Right.
And I'm curious, I'm sure folks ask you this kind of thing too. I'm curious what your response to something like that might be.
Yeah. I think it's quite individual, even though we're not cookie cutter versions of each other, but we all mirror each other quite a lot in this space, as you know. I think for me, one of the sort of preliminary questions I guess I would ask somebody is, or figure out myself through speaking to them, is what area are they most lacking in either trust with, or are they struggling with the most, or because there's always a recipe of a few different things and a few different elements that is required for recovery, right?
Yeah.
for the most part, majority of people that I work with certainly have an element of trauma in their past, have an element of emotional disconnect, or family issues, or some kind of achievement injury or whatever that they need to address and get to. But there are also people that have just had an injury, and then they're hyper focused on the pain of that injury, and that pain then persists, and they don't have necessarily a history of trauma. Like, I always use my partner as an example for that. His dad had knee issues, and now he started having knee pain, and now he's assuming he needs to have knee replacements, but actually he's just hyper fixating on the fact that he thinks he's got bad knees, and now he doesn't have bad knees anymore. So
Yeah.
I think some people misunderstand TMS in that it's like, oh, it's this disease that only I have, only certain people have, and not everybody else has. It's like, it's just a human thing. Everybody experiences mind body symptoms in their body. There's just a small proportion of us that tend to hyper focus on what is going on in our body, or tend to be hypersensitive people, or we're sort of predisposed to that turning chronic, and all of those things. So I would find out, first of all, I guess, where, what area is this person struggling with more? And it tends to be, in fact, I would probably bet money on the fact that this is 100% of people that I speak to, certainly that I coach personally, is the relationship to yourself element of recovery. So we beat ourselves up, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, we have to ace this, we have to be perfect, we have to do this, we have to perform, we have to show up, and all of this, have to do it right. And self-pressure, rooted in shame or whatever it is like a really big thing.
Yeah.
And I think as a starting point for people, instead of going, right, here's a meditation video, here's a breathwork video, here's a somatic tracking audio, go and do this and you'll be fine. It's like, all of those things are great, and they might provide relief, and they might work in the moment for something like a flare-up or whatever. That's not really a solution to the pressure that we have inside our nervous system, and the pressure that we put on ourselves. So there's so much that I recommend to pretty much everyone, is like that the things you have control over, and the things you can really influence in your own healing, is that connection to yourself. That do I pressure myself? Do I actually encourage myself? Do I resist the work? Do I, am I self-sabotaging? Am I all those things? So it's a bit of a suss the person out and then see what they need the most, which is generally self-compassion work, inner child work. And then just the basic structure of how to do the emotional side of the work, which is, some people, well, everyone resists it. Let's just put it that way. It's like, it's one of the hardest parts, isn't it? And then generally people aren't just sure, are kind of unsure of how to self-soothe. Like, I don't know what works for me. I don't like meditation. I don't like, XYZ. It's all very new to most people in this space. So it's a lot of kind of patience and just learning to show up for yourself. Again, part of self-compassion, just encouraging yourself to show up consistently and do something that you may not be very comfortable doing. Mainly that.
That's such a great description. And it takes me back again to that. For listeners, if you go to Dani's website, which I highly encourage you to do, there's this wonderful graphic that you've created that shows these different components of the journey, that really shows that it's not about just doing the soothing work. It's not about just, doing the, like, allowing the emotions work and feeling the feelings. It's about the combination of all those things, and how all these different puzzle pieces fit together.
Right. And I think for most people as well that I speak to and that I help, the journey seems to go in a similar order. Like, it doesn't always happen in that order, but for me, and for most people I speak to, it's kind of like you learn, and then you believe, And then that happens in a kind of a cycle as well, because you're always learning and you're always like fighting your doubt and then believing a bit more and then fighting your doubt, believing a bit more. So it happens kind of in a cycle that moves in both ways. You do emotional work, and then the emotional work makes you more dysregulated because it's really stressful. So then you need more soothing, and then maybe a bit more learning. And then it's like the recipe of those 6 elements that I've outlined in the website is like, it's a mixture of those things, but it probably will happen in a certain sequence. The last part for me
Yeah.
was the mindset stuff, the letting go of the fear of my symptoms,
Yes.
the understanding that like I'm not at war with myself. All those things happened quite late on for me.
Which makes so much sense. And,
Mm,
I can relate pretty closely to that too. And I think I was going to say a lot of folks, I'll just use myself as an
yeah,
example. I think early on in my journey, I'd hear people say, you need to like let go and have outcome independence and not care so much
yeah,
about it. It's like, fuck off.
yeah.
How am I supposed to do that when I'm freaking out and this is really scary?
Exactly.
And it's like, that's not really an appropriate goal for the beginning of the journey.
No,
That's
and
more
you
of an
can't do
appropriate
it.
goal
You
later
can't.
on. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can't do it. You don't believe it, and also fuck off, because
Right.
yeah, how dare you?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's
There's a
something that
time and a
takes
place.
time, I think, for
Yeah.
that. Yeah, it takes
Yeah.
time for your own psyche and your own brain or whatever to understand that that is what is actually happening, and you can let go and you can surrender, and you have to experience that
Yeah.
for yourself. You can't, it's like telling someone to calm down when they're having a panic attack. It's like, it's
Absolutely.
not the right moment.
Absolutely. Yes. It's more like, okay, after they've gotten to the other side of the panic attack and maybe they haven't quite realized that they're feeling okay, then it's a
Right, right.
gentle tap on the shoulder and say, hey, I think it's okay to let your shoulders go now.
Yeah, exactly. I think
Yeah,
there's like a limit as well to what we can absorb and do and take suggestion from when we're highly dysregulated. Like if we're
absolutely.
in massive survival mode, there's only really a small amount of things that we can do to help ourselves. Like the somatic work is good. We can move our body. We can do some breathing. We can do some meditating and stuff like that. But it's really hard to learn and shift your mindset and do brain retraining and all these extra tools when you're like absolutely freaking out.
Right. And that's as it should be. Like
Yeah,
that's not
exactly.
because you're doing
Biologically
anything
perfect.
wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
biologically perfect, even though it's distressing and highly irritating and very
Yes.
primal and old and all of that
And it sucks.
reptilian. It
It
sucks.
just
It's
sucks.
absolutely shit. Mm,
Um, I
yeah.
wanted to ask you this question. I call this podcast From Chronic Pain to Passion. And the reason I call it
Ooh,
that is because for so many people, including myself, including, anyone I've ever worked with, the journey starts off focused on symptoms. Of course it does. It's
yeah.
focused on there's a problem and I want to get rid of it. And
Mhm.
then as the journey progresses, it becomes less and less and less about these symptoms, which, may
Mm,
disappear, may hang around and come back. But the work
yes.
becomes so much less about that. And, what I've seen and experienced is it starts to become about like, oh my goodness, I never knew that I loved to do this craft. And now I'm going to like build a whole like business out of it. Or
Yes.
like, I actually do want to start a family. And now I'm going to like,
Mm,
all these different kind of life expansions. I'm curious if you relate to that. I mean, I know that you do, and
yes.
how you kind of make sense of that. Like, why does that happen?
I think that pain is like a doorway to your authenticity. Chronic symptoms and this distress that we have in our body, this like survival mode energy, is what I like to imagine is my inner child screaming for attention. Like, what about me? Why can't you hear me? Like, I need a voice too. What's this persona that you've turned into that is absolutely nothing to do with who we really are? You don't think those things, you don't believe those things. You need to stand up for yourself and self-advocate and all the, all that stuff.
Yes.
So it's like the self-awareness and self-discovery that happens throughout the recovery as a natural process is the work, like discovering your own voice, your own needs, your own values, your own self, what you like. I mean, what a revelation. I had no idea. I thought I just liked boozing and like, you know, distracting and numbing and being a perfectionist. And that was like my whole personality. Like I was just a really hardcore worky person, you know? So yeah, I think it's definitely nothing to do with symptoms other than the fact that symptoms are the catalyst to this sort of self-discovery. And yeah, it's definitely shone a light on my strengths and the strengths that I feel attuned to. Like I feel intuitively led into certain places, and I guide pretty much every decision I make with intuition now, and it's like yet to steer me in a weird direction.
Isn't that amazing?
Thankfully, yeah. Even though it's not easy. Like I make it sound like it's all rainbows and butterflies. It's
Yeah.
not at all. It's really difficult, but it's like actually listening to what you want and giving yourself options, and instead of going you know, in everything that you're doing in your life, like, yeah, whatever you want, or yeah, you decide, or I don't care, like dismissing or sort of numbing and suppressing your own opinions, even like
Yeah.
this is what leads to this sort of suffering, you know. So it's like a rediscovery, not a new self. I think it's just the old self, the real self, the like the one that's been in there the whole time, that crazy little girl that used to make mud pies outside. Like that's who I am. I do that now with my gardening. Like I'm exactly the same. I'm just in a different body, a bigger body, you know.
Yeah, I think
But
of it as
yeah,
that
that's
little
it.
inner activist that was like, no,
Right.
I don't want to do that. I want to do
Ex-
that.
exactly. Oh my God. Yeah, you've nailed it there. Like I have a like pathological demand avoidance thing where I if I'm told what to do, that's how I see it, or suggested what to do, or I have to do something outside of my own choice, it's like pulling teeth now. It's like, yeah, but it's not what I want to do, and it's not my decision. And it's like, it's gone the other way now. It's like uncomfortable to be told or suggested what to do. Oh my God. That's authenticity, though. That's like,
Yeah.
you know, noticing as well, like a big part of this work, and this still happens to this day, when you kind of build your self awareness, is like, why do I feel so triggered by certain things? And that as an example is the demand avoidance thing is like, you know, we're getting ready for my in-laws to come around tonight, and they're going to stay for the
Mm.
weekend, and they're
Mm.
good as gold. I love them to death. They're so sweet, but it's like, okay, now we need to do the bedding, and we need to do the shop, and we need to do, you know, XYZ. It's like I'm really triggered by the fact that I have to do these four things
Yeah.
that will take me like a couple of hours, no biggie, and I actually enjoy doing them because it's off my train tracks, it's off my
Yeah.
regular scheduled activity. Do you know what I mean? It's
Oh,
like, oh,
yeah.
it's bad. But yeah, it's such fun and games, this malarkey, isn't it?
There's so much to observe and to find
There is.
interesting.
Self-awareness is like, I don't know, is ignorance better? I don't know, sometimes I think it is.
Sometimes. And again, I'm like going back to the stage, if we're at an early stage of some part of our journey, it's not the time to be amused by it.
Right, no,
It's the
100%.
time to
It's not
be,
funny at all. It's
no.
not funny at all. It's awful.
Um,
But
speaking,
yeah, go.
I was going to say, speaking of the different phases of like, there's multiple journeys, right? There's so many different
Oh
journeys. And
yeah.
I'm just going to share a very, very nutshell snippet
Yeah.
from my own experience. And I'm just super curious if you relate to this, because it turns out we both happen to be folks who came from totally different careers. And then when we
Mm,
got into our own personal healing, that
mm,
led into these new careers. And
mhm.
I've been finding, much to my like initial freak out and then amusement, that the stages of my like career healing path,
Transformation.
yeah, my metamorphosis career wise, the stages of it are very closely paralleling the stages of my migraine recovery experience. In
Mm,
particular, when I first discovered mind body work, I dove straight in like a type A, like I'm going to do all the homework, and it got really intense about it. And initially, that intensity was actually very helpful because it helped me to absorb a lot very quickly and
Mm-hmm.
to make some transformations early on. And then after a while, the intensity went from being a blessing to a bit of a curse because now I'm like just so serious about it and so focused and
Yeah.
perfectionistic about the healing itself. And that's like, you know, running counter to the whole thing. And I'm starting to hit walls and burn out.
Mm.
Same thing I've noticed, in hindsight, has been going on with my business as a coach. So initially, like I was so excited, just so like
Yeah.
bursting with creativity and creating content, just constantly on overdrive, then hit a massive wall, like period of burnout. And now I'm like, okay, I got to find a gentler rhythm with this stuff, which is what I'm coming
Mm.
into these days. I'm curious if you've found parallels between the recovery stuff and the business stuff and how
Oh my
that's kind of
God.
been playing out.
100%. I mean, just the simple example of how many times we've had to reschedule this podcast recording because of my meltdown burnout trajectory is yes, is a big fat yes. Same. I dove into creating my TMS journey in lockdown. Basically, we built the website and I wrote all the content, created all the resources when we were stuck at home in COVID. So it was a nosedive for both me and my partner into that work, and then it was obsessive. Like it was, I got so into it and so into the groups and so into helping people and so into just like it was all day every day. And because it's all online, it was like on my phone, and then I was at my job. And because my job had slowed down, my sort of regular job had slowed down because of lockdown, I went straight into this, and this was like, well, this is all I'm doing now. So
Yeah.
definitely. And I think that is such a difficult pattern to break. Like one of the most difficult patterns certainly that I've noticed is that everything doesn't have to be an emergency.
Yes. Even if it's like a happy emergency, because I feel like,
Cooking my dinner,
yes,
cooking
yes.
my dinner. Why are you doing this at hype speed? Like, it's literally supposed to be a relaxing thing. You've got the music on, have a little glass of wine. No, 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 no. I'm going to cook it in 4 minutes flat. And I'm going to do all of the different elements of the food are going to be ready at the exact same time. And I'm going to be sweating and have the door open. And like, you get in the bath for a nice relaxing time in the bath. You can have a nice bath. No, I'm going to sit here and frantically exfoliate my body for 10 minutes and then be too hot and have to get out. It's not relaxing at all.
I love talking about this with you because, this intensity cycle, it shows
Ugh.
up in every area of my life, but I don't
Mm.
see it coming until it comes, even like
Oh, right, yeah.
learned so much through the migraine recovery about intensity. Didn't see
Mm.
how it was playing out in my business building until I hit that wall. And then
Yeah.
initially I felt a lot of shame about it, like,
Mm.
oh my goodness, how can I be teaching this stuff if I just like this is what's happening for me and I didn't even see it coming.
Yeah.
Um, and it's been fun talking about it with other
Yeah. It's a really
you
good
know,
point. It's a really good point.
it
And it's something that I still, I wouldn't say I struggle with. I know the whispers before they shout now. Like
yeah,
I will almost preempt canceling things when I know that it's definitely cyclical for me, and I know there's a hormonal element to that as well, and I know that there's a sort of an energy different levels for us women, depending on
yes,
what sort of season we're in and whatever. um but I think like you say, it's always the same patterns and it's always the same sort of lessons. It's like you push too far, you're going to burn out. You need to use the tools. You need to remind yourself of
yeah,
what you're doing this for again. And you know and like you say, there is a lot of shame in that, and I think that's probably a theme and a story that's followed us, certainly, and most folks I think in this space that we work with,
yeah,
that like if you're not firing on all cylinders 100% of the time, then you're not worthy of success, or you're not worthy of a voice in this space, or whatever the story is you tell yourself, it's just bollocks, really. And it's such a difficult lesson to learn. And this is probably why it keeps happening. It's like, no, done it again, done it
Yes.
again.
Yeah. And
The
I mean, of
highs are so
course,
high, right?
the
I don't
highs
know
are
if it's the
so
same for you. The
high.
highs are so high. Like for
The
me,
highs,
I pendulate so
yes.
dramatically between frozen fuck all to I'm going to conquer the world. It's like I need to just land somewhere in the middle where it's like I can cope, and my my capacity is honored and all that stuff.
And I
But
have to
yeah, I
say,
don't know.
like, the highs are fun. Like
Mm,
I like feeling just really worked up about stuff
same,
in,
same.
in an excited way. And I think there's a little bit of like, I don't know if I'm, you know, totally gung ho about letting go of that
No,
in
no.
order to get into a gentle rhythm. I think I've got to get into a gentle rhythm gently. Like it's not
Yeah.
going to work for me to let go of all that intensity all at once. It
No,
has to be
I
a
know.
gradual
No,
back
I
and
think
forth
there's
thing.
there's loads of positive elements to being type A perfectionistic
Yeah.
people. Like we would never have achieved everything that we have and done all the things we have done in our lives and got ourselves to this point. Yes, we've suffered to get here, but also we've probably achieved loads of great stuff as well. And like, I'm sure we can still be hyperactive perfectionists,
Yeah.
but in a productive kind of resourced way rather than a frantic, sweating 100 miles an hour, burning out for no reason other than your own weirdness way.
I find myself, saying things to my clients, and then after the session, it's like, oh, I need to listen to that. I'm hearing them say, oh, I did it again. I got back
Yeah.
into intensity spiral again. And I'm so mad at
Mhm.
myself. And I'm like telling them, well, it's not about staying chilled out all the time. It's like
Right.
meditation. It's just like bringing yourself back over and over again. And then
That's
it's like,
it.
oh, yeah, dummy. That's,
Yeah,
that's
it's
all it
like
is.
I often refer to it with people that I coach. Like it's like teaching a puppy to pee outside,
I love that.
right? It's like you can't just do it once and expect it to happen. You probably have to do it for years actually until they really get the
Yeah.
idea. It's like repetition, isn't it? And like neuroplasticity doesn't happen overnight. It's something that takes annoying progress, but yeah, we get there eventually. And we can be a
Yeah.
mess. Like being a mess is okay.
Yes. Going along with this theme,
Mm,
one of the patterns that I certainly experience myself, and so tend to see it in the folks who are attracted to working with me, or
mm,
um, is that part of this whole like TMS personality type, if you want to call it that, is that there's this simultaneous intense need
mm.
to be seen and heard and like
Oh
speak our
yeah.
truth and have our story witnessed and all that.
Mm.
And then a simultaneous, like crushing terror of being
Don't look at
missed.
me. Yeah.
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 And I'm curious, like, what are some of the tools you use to work with that dichotomy, being someone who you are public facing because you've got a business, and so you're
Mm.
putting that out there on a consistent basis.
I think it comes down to allowing myself to show up authentically and messily and
Yeah.
being all right with that and not trying to withhold this old career person persona. Like, you know, being really authentic and, swearing if I do on a podcast or whatever shows up for me. And I think that's probably the most relatable thing out of what I do as well, that people actually feel like they're in the room with me. That's not like someone teaching them that's above them and it's I know and you don't know kind of thing. Um, yeah, and just being compassionate towards myself and allowing that to happen
Yeah.
is definitely, it's been everything really. Like the self-compassion piece is, I think, the most important and has been the most transformational for me for sure. I've actually forgotten now what the original question was.
Yeah, it was about
I've
like
gone down the rabbit hole.
how do we manage the like that inner tension between that ferocious need to be seen and then that ferocious
Yes.
fear of being seen?
So I think there's just a big overhanging common thing that is seen in most of us, that we are desperate to be validated. We're desperate to be seen because we haven't been seen or heard for whatever reason, um, particularly early on in childhood, for whoever, whatever the scenario is. It kind of follows us along into our workplace, into our relationships, and we still have that need of like that original most stingy wound of like, I haven't, they don't see me, or they just don't get me, or and that validation is so important for so many of us. But like you say, I'm exactly the same. I'm still I wouldn't say battling, I'm still dealing with the validation seeker part of me, which she's so cute, bless her, she just wants to be seen. She's so cute with her little pigtails in and shit.
And she's got a lot of
um
really like worthwhile stuff to say too.
She definitely does. And yeah, it's not all about just look at me, like me, tick the box, press the like button. It's not, obviously there's a lot that's kind of been given as well. But I think I've forgotten what the second part of the question was again. Sorry. I
Oh, that's
also have
fine.
ADHD. I'm really sorry.
Oh, I'm getting lost in it too. My mind's pinging actually to a
Oh,
related
not being
thing. Is
seen.
that
Not
cool?
being seen. I remembered. I
Yeah,
remembered. Yeah, so I think it's terrifying to be seen
yeah,
as your authentic self. Like, I've never shown up in the world like me ever, even to my family, to my friends, I mean, to a certain extent, to my friends and partners, yes, but there has always been some kind of masking going on, some kind of, you know, needing to be the perfect partner, or needing to everyone to just like me and for me to be safe, and whatever kind of thing I can create in that way. So I find it terrifying. I've never done an Instagram live, for example, like doing something.
Mhm.
I hate being on the phone. Anything that is right here, right now, that is not editable and is not like amendable, and I can sit and write a little funky caption with something. If it's like right here and now, put me on the spot, oh, I lose it. I just would rather cut my eyes out. Um, but the desperate need to be seen is the other flip side of the coin, isn't it? It's like yeah, it's a very weird paradox that I think I see in so many people here.
Yeah.
But
I
just
relate to, I
yeah.
was just thinking like you were saying I lost the thread and I was thinking I lost
Mm,
the thread too because actually, I mean, you and I, folks who are listening to this are only hearing the audio, but we are actually on video with each other and I'm
mm.
recording the video, which we're both aware of. I find I get in, I don't know if brain fog is the right word for it, but every time I'm recording a podcast, regardless if I'm the host or the interviewee, I'm like, am I gonna completely forget where I am or what I was saying?
Oh
Because
yeah.
that
Oh,
happens.
every time.
Yeah.
Every time. I mean, it happens when I'm at my own desk doing just my own thing. I've got 500 tabs open in the browser and 500 other tabs open in my brain.
Yeah.
And I synapse, like it just happens. It
It
happens a
does.
lot.
It
If
does.
you've listened to a podcast with me before, like, well, sometimes they edit it out because it happens quite a lot. But yeah, this is how I roll. It's very, very much blah 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 blah.
To me, that's
Who am I?
like, in other areas, my stress response would be like head tension. But for whatever reason, in this like being seen live arena,
Yes.
the stress response is like, poof,
Shut down.
what was I saying?
Yeah, exactly. Like
Yeah,
mid-sentence dissociation. It's weird, isn't it?
it is. You're talking about relationships and
Mm.
unmasking, and I think I saw that you've got like a course available called Unmasking. Is that
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's coming up in March.
So as you've been like, you know, on this personal path of unmasking, has that changed your existing relationships? Has it attracted like new friendships? What's that been like?
Yeah, yeah. It's been a wild one. It has really affected my relationship with my family. And this was
Yeah.
originally based on kind of some of the work that I did in Journal Speak, some of the stuff that I uncovered that I realized that I was still really upset about and I needed to
Mhm.
voice and stuff like that. And it didn't go very well. And I needed to take some space. So I had some no contact time from my
Yeah.
family when I was just creating space for myself to recover from that and do therapy. And I did some EMDR and stuff.
Mhm.
I've forgotten the fucking question again.
If
I'm gonna
yeah,
write
no,
it
no,
down.
this is great. This
Relationships.
is because we're like
Relationships.
living examples that this is normal. Yeah, the question
Yeah.
is has the
Relationships.
unmasking changed existing relationships? Has it
Yes.
attracted new friendships?
Yes. So that with my family, which is now kind of recovering. My partner that I've been with now for 11 years has it's kind of turned from, what was this? I was the life of the party. I was the like, nothing's ever too much trouble. I'll do everything for everyone partner. Now it's like, actually, I'm not going to put a nice outfit on. I'm not going to put makeup on. Like, I'm not going to. And he's like, what is this? What did I sign up for? I didn't sign up for this. What is this? Like, no, he's good as gold. Like, we've worked through a lot of stuff, but showing up authentically has been a bit of a shocker to the people closest to me.
Yeah,
Um, and do you know what? I can count my friends on one hand. The trust, the circle of trust, that has not shifted. I had a couple of wobbles with a couple of people, but they were self-aware, thankfully enough of their own shit that
yeah,
we've resolved it. I rarely forgive. Like I don't remember ever a point in my life when I've ever forgiven anything that's gone particularly west. But definitely new friends, definitely been open to connecting and craving connection with people that are self-aware,
yeah.
people that are conscious, people that are like, and I'm not talking about like, oh, hippy dippy, positive love light and all that shit. People that are, they don't, people that you meet at a gathering and they don't talk about the weather. They're like, oh, so do you like murder? Or,
Yeah.
do you, what's your deepest regret? Or, people that you can actually have a deep and meaningful connection with. I really rate that now. Like I'd never really I probably think that would be really morbid before, but all I used to do is party before. So my sort of friend group was just people I met when I was partying. It wasn't even really deep connection, but I did meet a handful of people that have stuck. Yeah, that are real,
Yeah.
authentic people. Yeah. And they've also
It's
seen me in highs and lows. Do you know what I mean? Like I
yeah.
thought that I did lose quite a lot of connection with people through the chronic pain journey, like never showing up for events or canceling last minute. And some people just think you're an asshole when you do stuff like that, and they're like, oh well, I can't be dealing with you if you're so flaky or you've got this issue or you're so sad and boring. And like, and when people are struggling, it's hard for people to accept that or to face that and even deal with that. They don't know what to do with it. So yeah, I did lose a few friendships, but then maybe they weren't really that anything anyway. They were very
it's
superficial.
yeah. It's so interesting to I just love speaking with other people who've had,
Mm.
their own experiences because inevitably there's like aspects where I'm like, oh, that's totally different from me. Like I was never or I wouldn't never considered myself a party person.
Yeah.
But then there's always inevitably aspects where I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so similar to my experience. Like I
Mm-hmm.
also had a period of no contact with my family that was just felt like kind of a difficult but inevitable part of my healing path
Yeah.
and and then coming back together on the other side of that.
Oh, it's so
um
hard. It's so
yeah,
hard. I haven't really spoken about this with anybody else like publicly before. It's something that I think happens more than we realize
it
because a lot of people,
does.
it's such a
It
private
does.
thing. Like,
There's a lot of
and it's
shame,
so,
and there's a lot of cultural
ah,
judgment around it, I think,
oh,
is what it
massively.
is.
Like
Yeah.
everybody now in this space probably understands boundaries and understands, trauma and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. But actually taking action
Yes.
and self-advocating and standing your ground and saying, I won't, I'm not going to stand up for this kind of treatment or whatever that is for you
Yes.
is
Well,
so hard with your family.
doing anything that's going to make someone else uncomfortable instead of
Oh,
being the one to hold all the discomfort.
makes me feel
This,
sick.
yeah, there's this, and there is this cultural belief out there that you're a bad person if you do that. But the
Hmm.
consequences of not taking care of ourselves are pretty dire for some of us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's that important, and I think that is for a lot of us, like that is why one of the reasons why symptoms show up, because it's
Yeah.
your intuition is going no, like
Yeah.
no. Like even recently I got back in touch with my family and we were chatting a lot on social media, on like texting and stuff, and
Yeah.
I had this week where I had one of those burnout dips and I was just like, oh my god, I feel sick and I just want to sleep, and it was just real, I felt frozen and I just felt ill. And my partner was like, what's going on, do you think you might need to speak to a therapist, and, da, da, da. And I was just like, after I put put my foot down, it's probably not the right way to do it because it wasn't an argument or anything. It was just saying what I needed to say, setting my boundary with my family. Symptoms went away straight away, like
Wow.
within minutes of doing
Oh,
it. I had this like
did you see that? I got a
boost.
full body chill.
Yeah.
Like, oh.
I think, do you know what? There's so much power in feeling powerful. Like
Yeah,
powerlessness is fuel for this kind of shit.
it is.
Not feeling like you can say what you need to say just to live, just to feel comfortable in your own skin, is the
Yeah.
most vile poison that you can feed yourself. Like,
It's
oh, it's
nauseating.
just awful. It's totally nauseating.
Yeah.
And I didn't, and I'm still learning that now, and still learning to be comfortable in the discomfort of others. And that is a huge lesson. But I'd rather not be ill, thank you. Like
Yeah.
your emotions are not my emotions. If you can't cope with me taking a bit of space, then that's not my problem. Love
And
you.
I think that that shame is such an unavoidable part of breaking these patterns of holding stuff in. There's going to be shame. Like we're not going to speak
Mm,
up for ourselves and feel like, oh, that was great. I feel great about
no.
like, no, all this shame is going to come up. And
Mm,
I've found, like, speaking of the relationships that can form when you start to communicate authentically, I've found, like, I've made other TMS coach friends through Instagram. It's like, who knows
mm,
what the heck it was in one of their posts that attracted us to each other, but before you know it, we're like texting each other like, oh, I feel shame about
yeah.
this thing. Oh, I totally get it. It's normal. Like, I'm so here for you. And it's
Yeah.
so helpful to
Oh
have
my God,
that.
it's so life-changing, isn't it? To have
Yeah.
like, it is like having a pocket full of therapists, to have people that see you, validate you, understand you, but also work in the same space. And it, like I said before, we're all such mirrors of each other. Like how it's
Yeah.
still wild to me how similar we all are. Like even though we work in a slightly different way or our stories are slightly different, like we all tick pretty much the same boxes. So to have that sort of support, yeah, it's amazing.
Yes.
It's amazing,
And
really. And
and
I,
I
I
just
was
want to
never a
say
people person before.
And I just want to say to listeners, who might be thinking like, well, it's scary to like communicate authentically. It is.
Yeah,
And the amazing rewards that can come of it is like connecting with other people authentically.
yeah. And it does get easier as well. It
Yeah.
is it is hard. It's never comfortable, but it does get much easier and much more comfortable
Yeah.
when you are fluent in that, like standing up for yourself, and it just becomes natural, doesn't it? It's like, well, why wouldn't I say what I think? Why wouldn't I give someone my opinion or my preference? Like, you're
Yeah.
asking me what my preference is.
And I've got this pocket full of friends who they think it's great that I'm speaking my mind too.
Exactly. I think it's a big shift in the whole of human existence, really, isn't it? To this like non-conformity, or especially for women, it's
Yeah.
like it's this brand new. Oh, I can actually give my opinion and expect to be respected. That's quite new for us.
I think that's the perfect lead in because we're coming into like the last 8 minutes of this
Hmm.
hour, perfect lead into a question I'd love to ask, which is if you had a soapbox message, like this is the message that I really want to spread through doing this work. What is that message, or like what comes to mind in this moment? I'm sure it changes over time.
uh, I think I always go back to the feeling of, and I think everybody needs to hear that you are good enough. And I know it might not seem related to, I've got massive back pain. Like, well, I don't need to hear that. It is so relevant to all of us. Like that belief system that we carry from such a young age that for some reason we're not whole or we're not safe or whatever it is. Like I carried that not good enough story for ever until recently. Like now it's not there, but and I think that is something unrelated really to pain and stuff, but very relevant to this audience.
Very.
Like who you are is not what you produce. It is not, in the way that you do for others. It's not in how you show up in a perfect way. It's not, you're not a accumulation, a point system of all of the things that you can do. Like you're worthy just exactly as you are, and you have so much to offer and so much to give and so much to give to yourself.
It's such a simple message, but when you said it, I felt it in my chest. It was like,
Yeah. I think we all need to hear it, and we need to hear
we
it
do.
over and over. And
Yes.
it's sometimes hard to hear from other people because it's like, yeah, stick it on a poster. You are good enough. Of course I am. Like to hear that from yourself
Yes.
is just one of the most like transformational moments probably of your whole life.
And to anyone out there listening who feels like, well, I don't know if I want to say that to myself,
Yeah.
if it's not something you've said to yourself over and over again, like that's something new to try. Who
Yeah. And
knows?
what are the reasons why you don't believe that?
Yeah.
What are the things that are telling you that that's not true? And that those sort of things will lead you to what needs to be healed underneath all of the pain and all of those symptoms and all of the shit. Like
Yeah.
that disconnect with your true worthiness is part of why this happens, isn't it?
If there's a listener out there who is feeling inspired by this conversation and feeling very scared to take their first step, whatever their first step is, um, what might you say to that person? I mean, and you and I have been there ourselves.
Yeah, I'd probably say just be curious about the work that goes into this kind of recovery. You don't need to have a PhD in chronic pain to be able to overcome chronic conditions. You don't need to have everything perfected and learned and nail it and do all these tools and spend all this money. And it's really about just starting to improve the relationship you have with yourself and start really small. Like, don't bite off more than you can chew, you know? It can start, and that's really hard as well. Like, you will only understand this once you've tried too hard. Like, it's quite
Yeah.
hard to recommend someone to do this, but yeah, I think in every coaching call that I've ever had, I always recommend to people to put a photo of their younger self on their phone screen and leave it there. And every time they pick up their phone, they are reminded to be kind to themselves. And that just really starts to develop a beautiful shift in how the recovery goes.
I
So
love
yeah,
that. I
that
might
would be
do
it.
that. That's a good one.
I had a little picture of myself on my phone for about 2 years.
Yeah.
She's just such a cute little picture. Like it helped me so much because I I understood the idea of self compassion. I didn't really know how to do it. I was like trying mirror work and I was trying to give myself positive affirmations, but I just thought it was bullshit. I was just like, this is
Yeah.
absolute nonsense. I can't love myself. I can't, it was like, this is just stupid. But when I saw her, I was like, oh, little baby, she didn't deserve any of that. Like, oh, and that that bridge of tenderness and like empathy, and it's really emotional, especially if you're imagining a version of yourself at a time that was difficult. It's like, how could you not feel empathy and compassion for that person? And it helped me to then build, well, that is actually me.
Yes.
It was third person to start with, but then eventually it became, okay, yeah, no, she's me, she's part of me.
Yes.
Huge.
I love that.
It's so cute.
Before we sign off for today, where can people find you, and what sorts of things can they find you for?
So my main area, I guess, would be my website that you mentioned earlier. That is mytmsjourney.com. And that is basically a hub of all of the resources that I use to recover, and my own recovery journey roadmap that you mentioned as well, with the 6 simplified steps of recovery. It's a bit of my own personal story and all of the kind of steps and elements to recovery in there as well. And there's all of the podcasts to follow, and this will go on there, and all of the things that are, legitimately valuable to someone recovering. And then I mainly live on Instagram and Facebook every day. Like, I post pretty much every day. And my next kind of live offering that we mentioned earlier is called Unmask, and that is starting in March. That is a 4-week introspective journey, I'm calling it. It's sort of a weird name, but it's basically it's 4 live calls throughout March, a overcoming people pleasing and perfectionism ebook. It's a 30 days of self-inquiry prompts and writing exercises to overcome personality traits that influence dysregulation and chronic symptoms. 30-day pass to my yoga school. So it's this like 30-day, I don't want to use the word challenge because I hate that word. I think it's really not very trauma informed. So it's an 30-day invitation to show up, and there's lots of different resources to use throughout those 30 days. So to kind of overcome this topic that all of us seem to have in this space, that is this overgiving, over and under feeling type personality. So that's a bit more of a niche topic, I guess, that I would not than I would normally do, but I'd like to create different courses for separate subjects on this recovery. So yeah, but there's other bits on my website under courses as well. That there's an emotional embodiment course, which is 12 sessions of guided self-inquiry and soothing and somatics. There's the yoga school on there. There's the foundations of mind body healing course. There's meditation bundles, lots of different things. But the Unmask is the next live one that I'll be doing face-to-face on Zoom.
Beautiful. So for those who are interested, you can find that on Dani's website and on her Instagram. And I really encourage you to go to both of those places. They're just so clear, and they break things down so simply and beautifully. They're pretty to look at.
Thank you.
Yeah, really recommend.
Thank you,
Dani,
Dani.
thank you so much. This has been just as much of a pleasure as I knew it would be. So happy to finally get to chat with you. And thanks for being
Me
here.
too. I'm sorry it took so long. Like, I know when we do these things, it's like, why I could have just done that, and it would have made me feel so much better.
Divine timing, because I was in a massive period of burnout. And as folks may have noticed, this podcast has not been coming out as regularly as it used to.
Because we're human, and this is what we do. We show up authentically and just do what we can, don't we?
Mm-hmm. All
It's been
right.
a pleasure to see you.
Such a pleasure. Take good care.
Bye, love. Bye-bye.
Hey friends, it's Anna. Let me ask you something. If you're struggling with chronic symptoms, have you ever felt like pulling your hair out and screaming, "Why the bleep am I still in pain?" That's definitely what I was asking earlier on in my recovery, so I can totally empathize, and I would love to help you get some clarity. So I've created a quiz just for you that's called "Why the bleep am I still in pain?" And yes, you can take this quiz even if your symptoms are not pain specifically. Just head to my website, annaholtzman.com, and you'll see a big old button there that says Take the Quiz. So why don't you head there right now before you forget? And if you found this episode helpful, please go rate and review the podcast. That helps other people who are struggling with chronic symptoms too to find the podcast, and I would appreciate it enormously. Thank you for listening, and until next time, take good care.